The first COVID-19 vaccines have started to go from the airplane into people's arms. Ontario and Quebec have both delivered their first shots, and now other provinces, including here in Alberta, will do the same very soon. Joining me now to talk about this and what's going on with the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine is political reporter Brian Lilley, who joins me once again from Toronto. Brian, why are some giving doses to long-term care residents before frontline health workers?
Well, it seems to be a difference of choice, and you see that in different parts of the country, different parts of North America. Both Ontario and New York State, for example, chose to inoculate frontline healthcare workers, nurses, or personal support workers that work in long-term care. And I guess part of the argument, there's twofold. One, as Premier Ford has said many times when cases have gone up in long-term care residencies, he says, look, it's not the residents that are bringing this in. They're not going anywhere. It's staff who are picking up the virus in the community and bringing it in. So that's one argument. The other is logistical. So Ontario getting 6,000 doses in this first round of delivery, 3,000 for Ottawa, 3,000 for Toronto. You need to put them somewhere with a freezer unless you're going to use them all right away. And those were hospital settings rather than long-term care. So they decided that they would inoculate the frontline workers first. Quebec went the other way, and they found a way to get them. They're getting fewer doses, but they got them to long-term care facilities in Quebec City and Montreal. But Quebec's also doing something different. And some of the other provinces are doing this as well. They are vaccinating as many people as they can. So they're probably getting about 4,500 to 5,000 doses, and they're going to use them all this week. Ontario is saying, okay, we've got 6,000 doses. We're going to vaccinate 3,000 people and hold back the other 3,000 doses because they don't know when the next shipment's going to come. And if they don't have another 3,000 doses 3 weeks from now, guess what? Those first round of shots, they become useless. You've got to have that second shot. So, differences between the provinces and how they're doing it, the feds not critiquing either style.
Now, even though we're receiving thousands of doses of the vaccine, it may be sometime before all Canadians who want to be vaccinated will be vaccinated. Health Minister Tyler Shandro here in Alberta talked about the 3,900 by Wednesday, and then another 25,000 are also on the way.
Well, and that's the hope. I mean, and that's why you've got different provinces vaccinating in different ways. The hope is another 25,000 for Alberta by the end of December. Anita Anand, who's the federal procurement minister, is still saying we're talking every day. And I'm not trying to cast doubt that they will show up, but it's just when will they show up? They're talking every day. They're trying to figure it out, and they're doing their best. So you've got the best bet for most of us getting vaccinated, because we're only as a country getting up to 249,000 doses by the end of December. The best bet for us as a country to get vaccinated sooner rather than later is for the new vaccines other than Pfizer's to come online. We know that Moderna is very close. We're expecting a decision early in the new year. That's part of the up to 6 million doses the feds have talked about between now and the end of March. That's enough for 3 million Canadians. That's 8% of the population. So we need AstraZeneca to be approved, or Johnson & Johnson, Sanofi, GlaxoSmithKline, Novavax. All these places need to be approved faster. And that's the only way, Hal, that I see us getting vaccinated sooner than what the Prime Minister's current plan is, which is more than half of us by September. It could happen. We weren't expecting to have any vaccines approved by the end of the year. Now they're here. We were told it'd be a year and a half at least to get a vaccine, less than a year. So this could happen. There's just going to be a lot of hoping and praying for it.
Now, in the middle of the pandemic, the Trudeau Liberals announced a major hike in the carbon tax, which will mean more to heat your home. Now, Brian, didn't the Liberals say that this was something they wouldn't do? And is this all part of the Liberals and UN's reset strategy?
It absolutely is, because we saw the Prime Minister on the weekend virtually attending a United Nations summit on climate change. And he said quite clearly that, part of the rebuild has to be taking strong action on climate change. Well, why? How? The UN has said that the pandemic has shown that we can change lifestyles quickly through lockdowns, and that we need to learn the lessons from this to change society for climate change. That's what the Prime Minister was endorsing on the weekend. He's also said in the last election we're not going to raise the carbon tax above $50 a ton. Anyone that knew anything about the theory behind using carbon taxes to lower carbon emissions knows that if it's not high enough, it won't work. That's the theory. You charge higher and higher rates, and eventually people say, you know what, I'm not going to use gasoline. I'm not going to use natural gas. I'm going to switch to something else because this is costing too much. You drive up the cost to drive down usage. At $50 a ton, it wasn't enough. But in the last election, the Liberals just kept saying, this is misleading, this is false what the Conservatives are saying. Because the Conservatives said they're going to up it to $102 a ton. Well, guess what? Now they've announced they're going to up it to $170 a ton, a 566% increase between now and 2030. That's dramatic, and according to the UN, still not enough. It's got to go higher. So, for now, it's a 566% increase. We'll see if it goes as high as $300 a ton, after the next election.
And let's see if we go back to horse and buggy. Wow, that's incredible. Now, part of the new carbon tax plan is to not only increase our emissions targets, but to also spend $15 billion on green initiatives. Brian, the announcement came the day after the Prime Minister said no to the provinces for an increase in healthcare funding.
Yeah, and he didn't tell them about any of this, did he? He didn't tell them that we were going from 30% below 2005 levels to 40% below 2005 levels. Didn't tell them about the carbon tax on the call. Didn't tell them about the $15 billion for green initiatives. But what he did tell them was no when it comes to asking for more money for healthcare. The plan when healthcare was designed as a national program in the 1960s was feds pay 50%, provinces pay 50%. By the 70s, under Pierre Trudeau, that was down to 35% from the feds. Then it went down to 14% under Chrétien in the mid-1990s. It went up to 22%. The provinces were saying, increase to 35%. Just get us back to that level. Become a real partner again. This is across party lines. John Horgan's a New Democrat, Jason Kenney's UCP. You've got Liberal premiers across Atlantic Canada, Conservative in Ontario. They were all saying the same thing, and the Prime Minister said no. The next day, he announces $15 billion for his green initiatives, and just this week announced another $500 million for foreign aid for COVID-19. But when it comes to the healthcare system in Canada, all he will tell them during the meeting is no. After the meeting, he said, well, we're open to giving them more money. But during the meeting, he emphatically told them no and used expressions like you don't fix the foundation when there's rain coming through your roof. Not sure what that means. It's an awful expression. It's a bad analogy, but those were the words the Prime Minister was using.
Brian, newly released documents from Global Affairs Canada shows that the Trudeau Liberals were looking to train Chinese troops in Canada even after Michael Kovrig of Michael Spavor were kidnapped. Now, the government's response to this was to blame the former Harper government?
Yeah, I'm not sure how you do that because the key point is what you just said. After the kidnapping of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. These documents were released partly by mistake. There was an access to information request for some documents related to Chinese-Canadian military exchange, and they released a whole pile of information unrelated to the request. Now, normally things like this would be redacted. They'd be blacked out. Instead, these were grayed out. They didn't they didn't black them out enough. You could still read what was there. And what was discovered was that General Jonathan Vance, the chief of the defense staff, after the kidnapping of the two Michaels, canceled a cold weather military training exercise for Canadian Forces based Petawawa. That's about 2.5 hours northwest of Ottawa. And he said, you know what, we're not going to do this anymore. The Liberals blamed the Harper government. Why? Because of an agreement starting in 2013 to have military exchanges. Now, my colleague Joe Warmington went to the college where some of these officers trained, and the officials there said, yeah, some Chinese officers did come. That part doesn't bother me so much. Officer exchanges happened. They even happened during the Cold War now and again, but it's the military training of war game exercises on the ground that really has to bother people. And when Jonathan Vance, the chief of the defense staff, said no, Global Affairs Canada became upset. They warned that this could upset China, and they were concerned about Canada-Chinese relations, as opposed to saying, you know what, good move. They kidnapped two of our people. We're not going to train their military.
So let me ask you something. What's the latest with the two Michaels? There were reports that they were originally tried for spying, but that turned out to be false.
Yeah, I woke up to that news on December 10th, which was the 2-year anniversary of their kidnapping. And I've got a breaking news alert on my phone from Associated Press saying that they have been tried. Uh, what? This is, and they're citing a Chinese Foreign Affairs Ministry spokesperson. It turns out it was a bad translation. And so thankfully there is no change, but that's a little sad. As I was writing in the Sun, that's sad. The best we can say after 2 years is that there's no change. There's very little that I think the government could do now. Early on, we could have leaned on the Americans and said, look, you caused this. We're part of your extradition warrant. We're fulfilling your request. You lean on China to get our two guys out. We didn't do that. We didn't rally our allies properly. At this point, I'm not sure that China is going to do anything other than wait for Meng Wanzhou to be released and then eventually demand more things from Canada in exchange for releasing Kovrig and Spavor.
Let's discuss the new bill on MAID, or medical assistance in dying. Now, Ottawa has asked for a third extension on this new bill. Brian, many Canadians have concerns about it, the new bill, which would potentially put vulnerable people at risk.
A lot of concerns being raised by opposition members in the House of Commons, especially from the Conservatives, but also by various senators. And so it did pass in the House of Commons and went on to the Senate just before the House rose for the Christmas break. Now, here's the problem. The Senate will undoubtedly pass some amendments. The deadline for this bill to be passed, according to the court, now this was a lower Quebec court. The government chose not to appeal it. The deadline was December 7th. The government could not manage their own bill to get it passed in time. They knew that there would be amendments from the Senate. They still pushed it through. They still were playing games up until the last minute, and then they turned around and asked for a third extension. So this is not going to end anytime soon. I think the government should have appealed it. There was a lot of discussion back and forth, a lot of pouring water in their respective wines to get the first medical assistance in dying passed, because the Supreme Court has said this has to happen. And they found a way to honor the original court ruling while still respecting concerns that people had about vulnerable people, about seniors being pressured, about people with disabilities. All those concerns are reopened again as they expand who can ask for this. So this isn't over, and it won't be for some time, but there's a bit of a problem here in that the agreement to have hybrid virtual and in-person sittings has expired, and the Liberals walked away from negotiations with the opposition parties to continue that, and therefore they're going to have to meet in person if the Senate passes those amendments. They may have to be called back, and they may all have to be meeting in person unless they can strike a new agreement.
Brian, we only have about a minute left here. The bill that would ban conversion therapy will not be voted on until the new year, and the Trudeau Liberals did bring in some changes that will leave parents worried about their future. Tell me more about that.
Well, there's a lot of concerns about how parents will be treated in this, and will this bill unfairly penalize parents who don't follow exactly to how progressive activists want it to go. This, again, is one of those bills where people of good faith should be coming together and saying, okay, how do we approach this without ostracizing anybody, without making parents potential victims? They haven't been doing that. They've been trying to push it through. They've been trying to use it as a wedge issue. There were some changes made at the last minute, including the way that gender expression was going to be defined. And again, this is not going forward yet. The Conservatives had voted to pass it at first reading, Hal, so that they could send it to committee and try to get some amendments through. That's being blocked elsewhere. So expect a lot of politics around this when the House resumes towards the end of January.
Well, it should be interesting to see how that unfolds. Toronto Sun columnist and political reporter Brian Lilley, thanks for your time today.
Thank you.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.